So it's December 2023 in 2 days' time. So we've just hit our first -3s and -4s here in the UK, so it's quite cold outside. And the last of my Amorphophallus have gone down for the winter dormancy, which means the time when it rests over winter. So I wanted to just show you a little bit about what that dormancy cycle is and why it even happens. And I've got some good examples of Amorphophallus that have already gone to sleep and a couple that have just been hit by the frost. So let's have a look at them one by one, and I'll explain the dormancy cycle to you. So first of all, let's just take a look at some Amorphophallus that aren't going into the dormancy cycle. So this one is Amorphophallus variabilis. This one is it's from Southeast Asia, and like a lot of Amorphophallus, you find it in jungly areas, and it doesn't get much of a freeze. Now I keep these wouldn't last in the garden, so I keep these indoors in like a heated environment. And their cycle, they do go dormant, but they're nothing like the ones that I'm going to show you. So there are lots of Amorphophallus that have different kind of life cycles. So a lot of these are just going to keep going and keep growing. These are only young ones. But what we're going to look at is the more common varieties that you'll find available to go into a UK garden. So I'm going to show you ones like Amorphophallus konjac and variants of that. So there's one called Amorphophallus Mary Sizemore, which is a hybrid of that, such as Amorphophallus archispadix. And I'll list a few others to give you an idea of the ones we're going to look at. So I did a video earlier on in the year about what they were like in autumn as it was coming to the end of summer. So this is a good follow-up video about what happens to them after that time. So to give you an example then, so this one is an Amorphophallus konjac, but it's a Mary Sizemore one. And it's gone floppy, so it's been hit by a frost. So I've left it out too long. I shouldn't have let it get to the point where it sees a frost. And basically, it hasn't even gone what we would call gone down, which is normally when it just droops like this, ready to go. This dropped because I let it to stay out in the frost. So it's pretty much dead in the water at this point. But the tuber inside the pot is absolutely fine. So here's another example of one that got hit last night. So this is an archispadix, left it out too long, and obviously you can tell they are frozen, damaged leaves. So it's not game over at all because the tuber copes absolutely fine in the first couple of days. It's if it freezes solid that you have a problem. So that basically all needs to come off at this point here, and it should come off fairly easily like that. A lot of them will come off in that way. Now, what you can see with this archispadix is obviously the foliage is gone. This is a petiole here, so this isn't a stem. The stem is this top bit under here, as with a lot of aroids are like that. And then down in here, there's a new growth point. You can just about see it inside there. That's where the new growth point will come from next year. And then what you can also see, and you can see it better on other ones in a minute, is these are a number of roots. So normally in aroids you'll get two types. So you'll have the feeder roots, and you'll have these which are like contractile roots. You can see that they're very, let me zoom right in for you. So you can see that they've got this kind of like rolled sleeve effect, which usually means, certainly in a lot of genus like Arum, and I think Pinellia do it, and a few others similar, these will contract and pull the tuber down into the soil. So if you see this outer core and an inner cortex that's tightening or shrinking, the outer surface then wrinkles up. So that's a good sign of a contractile root usually. So basically, as this plant has gone down now, all these roots, we can dry this off and then remove those roots. And what you're left with then is the tuber that you would dry off and then store for winter. So let's have a look at a few others. I'll move this one aside and get you a couple of others that you can see more easily. So this one is another Amorphophallus Mary Sizemore, and this one has got a bit more left on it, but it's got some other things to show you. So what you've got is the bulk of the tuber here, and you've got these little eyes here that are growing other little tubercles sometimes called, and they can quite often come out on a stolon. They don't look like they are on this one, so these pretty much just look like they're growing off the tuber. So that's one way that these will propagate vegetatively. They'll basically create new tubers off the side that will become new plants that will come up here, and that's very, very common. Now I've chopped this off. You can just about see into the xylem and the phloem there of the petiole there, the vascular bundles that basically take the water up from the roots. That's the xylem. They're the tubes that are called xylem. And then you've got the phloem tubes, which basically send the sugars back from the leaves, where it's photosynthesized, back down into the tuber, and then it forms the tuber for the next year. But that cycle, that sugar or starch going into this tuber and making it, there's a specific way that it does that by using up the old one first. So what we'll do is we can now have a look at one that really clearly shows that cycle. So let's move over to a full larger konjac. So this is the first of the two konjac that I'm going to show you with it. This one's been dried, ready for storage, and the roots have been pulled off. The growing eye will come out of this center bit at the top. That will be the new growth next year. But also what you get on them is a lot of these things, which are called, basically, these are stolons, or a growth that comes off the tuber that then has another tuber on the end of it. So that bit there will have tissue or stems that will be able to reproduce and start a new plant. Whereas all of this here is quite inert. The cells here are just basically enough to get this away from the main plant. And if you have a look here on the top, you can see this one has formed a full new tuber without even going off on a stolon. So that is an exact replica, or a clone if you want to say that, because genetically it's exactly the same as this. No other plant genetics were needed to make this. So that will come off when it dries. In fact, I'll pull it off now to show you. You can see there the white, the tissue inside it. I think it's parenchyma cells pretty much make up most of this. So just starch, just energy. And then these will go off and become new. These are what you can see shared online a lot. These are the tubers that get shared. That will dry off there, and that will start a complete new tuber in the summer. The same as this one. So obviously this came straight off the body of the tuber, and this one's got a bit of stolon on it as well. So you'll see that a lot. So let's move on to a bigger version, and you'll see a bit clearer what I mean. So here's another version, and I'm going to show you another one after this that's much, much bigger. But I wanted to show you this one because it shows you same plant, so it's just a konjac again, but it's showing you a bit more of an evolution of how, as they get older and bigger, you can see that there's more stolons and then more tubers, and they go off in all kinds of different directions. So the tuber will sit in the ground vertically like this. So this would be the bottom. Roots come out of the top and go down. Very different than a corm. A corm will always have a basal plate under here and roots coming off. So that's one way that you can always tell. And a lot of people say, and even me on a lot of my older videos, I would say things like an alocasia corm. Well, it's not. It's an alocasia tuber. It doesn't have a basal plate with roots coming out underneath it, just like a true bulb. A true bulb will have that, like a garlic bulb. They would have a base plate and roots coming out of the bottom. So this tuber here now, you can see it clearer. There's the growing eye for next year. That's where the petiole for the main growth will start next year. And this has got lots of eyes that have become stoloniferous is the right word. So they've become stolons that become other tiny little tubers. So again, they break off in the soil and become separate new plants and then start the cycle again. But let's have a look at how it gets going. This next one is a great example of it. So it's still very wet because it's only come out of the ground about 15 minutes ago. So we're getting bigger now, and you're getting much more complex. So you're seeing a lot more going on with this one. So this one is about 400-500 grams. So it's nowhere near the biggest ones that I've got, but it's quite big to show you what I'm about to show you. So first of all, let's look. Each of these little bits that has broken off is a stolon, and at the end of them, you will see what can become new growth. So imagine from there, that is the tuber. So I would, once these are dry, I would quite happily break these off and just save that bit. You will, generally speaking, not get growth off that. And the only way, I mean, I don't throw these away, because there is quite often an opportunity. Let me just show you closely on this one, where you can get additional eyes coming off this stolon. So you see here, that would be a growth point. And can you see here? that could be a growth point. So that means there's meristems in there. That means there's the potential to grow something new from there. So there's no harm in planting all of these just to be sure. So don't throw these away thinking you can't get anything from them. If there's an eye on it, you know, removing a bit of the outer surface. This is a bit spongy here. So you can see that this was starting to rot here. So that definitely I would cut it off. But look here, there's an eye formed on the stolon there. Now that can form new life. So always be looking out for that. Now on to the important bit. How does this all begin? So when you plant a tuber, so let's put one side by side, a smaller one. So let me find you another one. So we start off with this, and it goes into the ground and it shoots up a petiole from here. So a new stalk, new petiole. That has leaves, and those leaves get going because of the energy stored in this tuber. And then what happens is it gets to a point where petiole is up, leaves are out, photosynthesis kicks in, and that starts making sugar that goes back down here. But at that point, this tuber is now a shriveled little mass. And what it then does is it converts that sugar into storage for the next season. So this thing that you're holding is going to disappear completely. You don't get the same tuber back every year, you get a new one. And here's a great example of that. So this here is the new tuber that has developed this summer. And the theory is you want this to be bigger than the one that you put in the ground last year. So it's good to record what size, what weight these are. So you can do width across and you can do weight as well. Obviously you can see the roots that were on it. I've pulled them off, I've not dried them yet, but you can see that there's feeder roots and you know, contractile-ish roots. So I'm not too sure with a konjac whether these are contractile, but they look exactly like contractiles. It's growing extra stolons, so it's got lots of stolons with some odd growth on it as well, so some roots off the stolon. And then as you can see there, it's got an eye at the end, so that's obviously going to be growth for the new year. I'll break these off at some point. But then the really interesting thing that really explains dormancy well is this. So underneath, and for most of these, you will see a mush like this. You can feel that it's actually a mush. And what that mush is that tuber from last year, the remnants of that. So that is what fed the plant when it started. So that bit fed the petiole and then the leaves. Then the leaves give it back, so it returns the favour by giving the energy back to this newly formed tuber here, which starts the cycle again. Now, if you look, you can see this little potato-y size thing here is about 1/4 of the weight of this thing here. And what you'll find is, and I'm going to do it for you on camera now, is that these things normally, if you give them a little twist, I'm sticking my fingers in mush now, which isn't the most, you know, this is why drying it off first is usually quite good. So if I pull underneath like this, that entire thing comes off. So that is the old tuber. So that little cap and that mushy cap is basically what drove the cycle to start at the start of the season. And then what's left underneath, you're going to see, let me just clean my hands for a second. There we go, got rid of the mush. So this little cap here is the base of the new tuber here. So this is going to dry, and we will break these stolons off once they're dry. The roots will all come off and we'll have a dry tuber. And then this entire thing starts the cycle again next year. And then that will again grow bigger again and bigger again. And that's the idea, is that we get this dormancy cycle with an increase of weight and girth on every single season. And to give you an idea of what the dry bit looks like, is there's the dry version of this. So and this is a konjac, I think. That was a konjac. I think I might have just lost the label a second ago. So just to reiterate, we've got original tuber grows, puts up a petiole, puts out the leaves make sugar, sugar goes back, makes the one for next year. And that is pretty much how all of this type of aroid perform and how they grow. So this one is actually a Sauromatum, so it's obviously a different genus, so it's Sauromatum instead of Amorphophallus. But just to show you, it does exactly the same thing. So I'll just pull this top off to show you. Hopefully we can just, I know it's not going to come off altogether, but there is there's a new growth point in there. There's the roots as described. So these are just the contractiles, and there you can see there are feeder roots and they're contractile roots. So they don't have branching on the contractiles. You can see they're feeder and contractile. So they're the different roots, but exactly the same in terms of the both aroids, both Araceae, doing the same thing. So remember what happens underneath. So there's no basal plate, and there's no root growth coming out of the bottom. It all comes out of, usually out of the top or the sides and from eyes there, and in between that you'll find extra tubers growing on the side, little tubercles there like that. So that's showing you exactly what it's like in Saromatum. So here's a good example of where it can go wrong. So this is another Mary Sizemore. So remember, that's a hybrid. So it's a Amorphophallus konjac and an Amorphophallus albus crossed. But if you look here, the tuber is not much bigger than the tuber from last year. So that just shows this hasn't had long enough to, or these new leaves haven't had long enough to make this new tuber much bigger than last year's. So this either started late in the season or hasn't been in very good conditions, or one or two other reasons. So whether it be nutrients or the weather, or whatever's caused it, it's basically caused it not to grow significantly. And one of the problems you can have with growing hardy aroids, especially things like Amorphophallus, is if this tuber is actually not getting bigger, it's going to get smaller, then eventually it will erode down to nothing and you'll lose it. So your job is to make sure that those conditions are right and that it makes it through, and it's bigger each season. It hasn't really done much in terms of offset either here. So you can see it's tried and there's some eyes coming up, but there's no actual offsets formed. So it's not had long enough in its pot or in the ground. So great example of where it's not worked well. So that's it really, that's what I wanted to show you. So these get dried off, as I said now. So there next to me here is a tray of ones that are all dried, ready to go. So these now all get stored. Amorphophallus don't really need to be kept wet at all. They unlike things like Aracema that will need a little bit of damp or a little bit of moisture, Amorphophallus, I keep them in little Hessian sacks usually. And sometimes if I feel that it's a species from a very wet environment, then I might just give it a spray every now and again. And they just start the cycle yet again for the new year. So into the storage box and then back out when it's time to start the next dormancy cycle, or the next cycle that includes a dormancy period. So I hope that clears up how Amorphophallus go through the dormancy cycle, and I hope you're a little bit more armed to help yours get through the next cycle. Thank you so much for watching these videos, and I do hope you're enjoying them. Please give it a thumbs up, and if you do give it a thumbs up, then why not subscribe to the channel, and I'll let you know when we're posting new videos, which is every week.